What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Blazers Uprise postgame show presented by BetOnline. The Blazers today lose to the Clippers. Not the Kings. The Clippers, but I have to wait for my computer to start back up with Photoshop and everything as my computer crashed. That's why the stream took a little longer to get live than normal, but we're back in our normal spots, Eric. I'm back on the left. You're back on the right. Feels much better. It feels weird to not be running the stream the past couple of streams. It's nice to be running it again. How does it feel to be back not running a stream?
It was weird. I was like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing something right now besides just waiting for you?
Yeah, and then you had to wait on me extra long because I had to wait on my computer. I had a blue screen of death saying your computer has to restart. My computer tanked today. The Blazers tanked today. They tanked successfully. They're one game away from 10.5-point odds. We'll talk about that. We'll have a Tankathon sim. We'll talk about Sharp. We'll talk about Kevin Knox. We'll talk about Trendon. We'll talk about the game tomorrow, final game of the season. We will have a normal post-game show for that. But before we get into that, let me thank BetOnline, our post-game sponsor all season long. Thank you to them for sponsoring us all season long. Use that promo code BELIEVE for a 50% reward bonus. Masters are going on. There's like trees falling and stuff.
Oh, man, that was scary. Yeah.
Scary, but, if you want to have fun instead of be scared, use that promo code BELIEVE on the Masters or baseball or basketball playoffs coming up soon. Playing games, lots of fun, sporting action for you to get in on the action with BetOnline, where the game starts. And where we're going to start with this post-game show, Eric, is Shaden Sharp was really good once again today, and he's been the bright spot of this tank, and just seeing him evolve has been a ton of fun all season long. Sharp in this game, 26 points, 4 assists, 2 steals, 10 for 20 from the field, 3 for 9 from 3, 3 for 4 from the free throw line, had just a insane kick-out pass that he might have landed on, and it might have been a travel, but just the fact that he, made that pass was really, really cool. You're starting to see him just be more of a playmaker, and I don't want to have this debate yet, but we are going to have to talk about the future in this game in terms of how the Blazers should look at him going into next season, and obviously Anthony Simons is a part of that conversation. Some people will make Damian Lillard a part of that conversation, but before we get into that whole conversation, I just want to talk about this game from him tonight. He hits a 32-footer as a defender goes under the pick and roll at one point in this game. Seeing him hit that 32-footer just kind of reminds you a little bit of Dame. Like, Dame is shooting that 100% of the time if somebody goes under the screen. And seeing Sharp do it with confidence and knock it down was cool. His dribble drive game has been so much better than it was earlier in the season. And I don't even know what changed. He's just more decisive. He's driving stronger. He looks more comfortable off the dribble just with his ball handling. And this is why I wasn't worried at the start of the season when, he had some bad turnovers and, was a 19-year-old rookie that didn't play in college to start the season. Nobody should have expected much from him, but it's why, there we go with the good old ESPN ad. It's why I didn't worry about it, because ball handling is easily developable. He has the athleticism. He'll continue to add strength. I just didn't expect the dribble drive game to look this much improved this early. I was looking at it as more of okay, this is who he's going to be mostly for the entire season, and he'll show flashes of being able to attack the rim and get downhill. I didn't expect it at this regular pace. Now, obviously, tanking has given him the opportunity to attack and have more responsibility and more chances to make things happen off the dribble, more chances to just get comfortable and learn from his mistakes earlier in the year. But still, even with this situation that the Blazers are in, I did not expect him to look this impressive, and his development this season is absolutely insane. Maybe, I don't know if I've ever seen a Blazer improve this much in one single season as he has.
Yeah, well, you know what I think it is? Earlier in the season, we even heard Chauncey say this when asked why he wasn't playing more minutes in certain games, and he said he kept blowing assignments on defense or whatever. Mm-hmm. And when you're a rookie and you're coming into a team that is trying to win, like they were earlier in the season, and if you make a mistake, you basically get your minutes taken away. That's like you're playing not to make a mistake. And so like I feel like he may have had all these skills there, to begin with this season if we just let him go, or we talked about this before the season, if he would have went on a team that had like a rebuilding type mindset that just let him play 30 minutes a game from game one, would he have shown this earlier in the season? I think he probably would have. But when the training wheels come off and your coach is now telling you you're the man for these last 10, 15 games or whatever it is, and you get to be the primary scorer, primary ball handler, you get to be the main defender. This is your show. Number one option. I want to see you drive off of pick and rolls. I want to see you pull up if you're open and stuff like that. It's so much easier for a rookie, I think, to play when your coach gives you that mindset and allows you to play that way versus holding you back and kind of just don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. And then you're always worried about screwing up when you're in the game. And now he's just going out and playing. And that's the type of guy who, if he just goes out and plays, he's really good and can make some incredible things. He had a finish today where he drove left and finished with his right hand in traffic around several defenders. And yeah, man, it's crazy how much like smoother and confident he looks in these last few games.
Yeah. I think the biggest improvement is just his ball handling, man. How many times earlier in the season did we see him just try and gather the ball and lose it? And when people talk about ball handling, I feel like the general thought that people think about in regards to ball handling is just dribbling. But ball handling is more than dribbling. Ball handling is being able to pick up the ball, gather the ball strong, and go up with it. Ball handling is being able to pick up the ball off the dribble with your left hand if you're going left for a pull-up, and being able to get your hands on the ball right on the gather so that you're going into your shot in a normal way compared to maybe having different hand placement than you would normally shoot with because you're trying to pick the ball up fast. Like, there's a lot of little things that go into handling the ball that I think have improved for him this season. Because there was times earlier in the year where he would try and pull up and it seemed like his hands were a little off or his form just wasn't the same or it wasn't smooth. Oh. We would see him try and gather the ball and lose it and fumble it. His dribble moves are sharper, but I think it goes beyond that. Just being able to gather and go up strong on layups, I think, has helped him. And being able to handle contact on the drive and still be strong with his dribble has helped him. And his pull-up jumper looks more consistently smooth. So I think that's been the biggest development that has made the difference for him in terms of his dribble drive game this year.
Yeah, and I think one aspect of that is earlier in the season, his dribble was way out in front of him, almost to where he had to reach to get it once he dribbled it. And that's just tough to do in traffic. And now when you pull up off the dribble, you want it like close to your body so it comes like right back up and then you can go up into your shooting pocket. And that's just one little tweak he's made in his dribbling is it's a lot more compact and a lot more closer to his body, so it's not so loose anymore. So I feel like that's helping him both take care of the ball in traffic, and also when he pulls up, he's not, like you said, reaching for the ball, so he's losing it and stuff because it's right there in the shooting pocket.
Yeah, and you know what that probably was? It was probably Dame in his year, because Dame is one of the like sharpest ball handlers in the league. You have different types of ball handlers. CJ was a hang dribble guy, hang it wide, crossover wide, kind of some sweeping dribble moves. Whereas Dame is very compact and very, like, just has the ball, like, right on his body. And
not
Dame
flashy, but he gets to his spots.
Yeah, it's very effective. And Dame has talked about in a podcast, I think it might have been the JJ Redick podcast, I'm not sure, but Dame has talked about in a podcast how he's always ready to shoot, and Phil Beckner and him, they train so that no matter what the situation is, Dame can just pull up out of it with his normal shooting form, which is very difficult. Like, a lot of people, if they go out there and play, even if they know how to play basketball a little bit, you have a couple of moves that you get into, and it's like a consistent rhythm on your shot. But it's super difficult to like mix up that rhythm or mix up the speed in which you're picking up the ball or throwing in a hezzy in certain moves and like all this little stuff that when you see it, it's just like, oh man, that looks good. But it's super difficult to just shoot at any point because you don't have a rhythm going into it. A lot of shooters like a rhythm going into their shots with a specific move or just a specific tempo, where Dame has been really good at not needing that in order to be a high caliber shooter. And that's why he's so deadly off the dribble. That's why he can get up a bunch of threes. That's why he makes a bunch of contested, difficult threes. And a big reason why I feel like that's the case with Dame is he has his dribble super compact. If you have the dribble super wide, it's really hard to pick it up into your shot. But if you have the ball tight to your body, it's really easy to just transfer that into your shooting pocket and go up with the ball. So seeing Sharp kind of transform to more of that dribble style, I think is a good thing. I think is a positive thing because he can elevate on his shots. He's shown that he can, he's not really bothered by contests. His pull-up jumper has become smoother. The way he's handling the ball, I feel like he can truly become, maybe not a Dame-level shooter, because Dame's one of the top 3 shooters of all time, in my opinion, but he can become that guy that can pull up out of a bunch of different situations just because the ball's always on his hip or the ball's always close to his body. So it's definitely helping him get downhill more, but as a pull-up jump shooter, having his dribble more compact, I think in the long run will help him be more of a lethal threat pulling up from 3 or pulling up in the mid-range. And if he can truly become that type of shooter with his athleticism and dribble drive game, I mean, who knows how good he could actually be, because the ceiling would be limitless.
Yeah, and I think one good aspect of being the number 1 option too is he gets to operate out of the pick and roll, and then so you're already dribbling and you're attacking off the dribble, whereas most of his shots opportunities or opportunities to drive were off attacking closeouts earlier in the season or just going ISO. It wasn't necessarily getting space to go downhill off a pick and roll. And when he pulled up for that deep three today, he's already dribbling and he doesn't have to take his man off the dribble. He got open based on the pick. So I think that's helping him too, just realize how easy the game can be for him with his special skill set.
Yep, absolutely. So just love seeing his development so far. A couple other good performances from this game. Trent Watford was 10 for 15 from the field. So was Kevin Knox. Both of those guys 10 for 15. Knox has 30 points. Watford has 24. Knox was 5 for 8 from 3. Watford was 2 for 3. Those two guys shooting those percentages from 3 is kind of crazy. 7 for 11 combined from those two guys. That's a big reason why the Blazers were in this game. And then Knox also has 11 rebounds. Knox has been good, man. I mean, I can't deny it. If you were there for the trade deadline stream, you'll remember me saying, I don't want Kevin Knox watch. We're going to somehow end up with Kevin freaking Knox. And then we traded for him and it was hilarious. But Kevin Knox just hadn't done anything in 4 years. And it was he was the prototypical guy. And I've said this before, Eric, but I'll say it again for those who haven't heard me talk about him like this. He was the prototypical guy who had size and a little bit of skill, so he was able to look good in college and look like a really good prospect. Oh, this dude is 6'9" and can do that at the college level, but he didn't have quite enough size plus quite enough skill to really make it work in the NBA. And there's always guys like that. Look at Derek Williams from, I forget which draft that was, but he was a 2nd overall pick out of Arizona. I think the Timberwolves took him, and he just wasn't skilled or big enough in order to do anything. Thomas Robinson was a guy like that with the 5th overall pick taken right before Dame. Wasn't tall enough, lengthy enough, or skilled enough to really make it work in the NBA, but he could dominate in college. And that's who Kevin Knox had been. But this year he's kind of figured out his shot, and some of his, I don't know, I'm trying not to buy into a small sample size on a tanking team because we've seen players excel. I mean, look at what Trent Watford looks like right now. But when we saw Trent Watford play for a team that was trying to win earlier this season, he looked much, much worse. So we can't overreact to a small sample size. But, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't mind having him back for $3 million next year.
Yeah, so this is what I always say about Knox is, once again, like his rebounding is okay. But other than that, he can score the ball, rebound a little bit, but what else is he good at? I don't think there's anything you can say are even an average skill set, because he's not good at defense. He doesn't pass the ball well, like we saw him tonight. He was just like, he gets his shots up, right? So DJ Vega says Fortnite. I would hope if you wore a Fortnite suit to the draft, you were good at Fortnite. So I don't know for sure, but
yeah, let's get a lobby with him.
You would assume he's good at Fortnite. But so like, and I put Watford in this category too. Like, we know Watford has skills. He can pass the ball. He can handle the ball in the short roll, take some pressure off the point guard when they get double teamed or whatever. He's got that little floater game. And he's shown the ability to, fake a handoff and take the ball to the hoop and score, can pass a little bit. But once again, doesn't play well defensively, doesn't rebound incredibly well for a big man. So we have these guys already. And then like Cam Reddish, same thing. Like, he's a microwave scorer who doesn't have a lot of other traits, especially defensive end. So we have all these guys that can score the ball. But we also have Dame and Anthony and Sharp and guys that can score too, that we don't really need when we have our full team guys that can score. So I'm fine with Knox being on the team next year, but we can't have him and Reddish and Watford. Like, I think you have to let one of Knox or Reddish go. And since Knox is already $3 million, I mean, Reddish isn't going to sign for less than that. So I'd let Reddish go, in my opinion, and just keep Knox, because you only need one of those two guys, because they're basically the same player, outside of Reddish maybe has a slightly better playmaking skills. But I think it's pretty clear that like you can depend on either one to just come in and be like a scorer off the bench. If you like an emergency scoring role, I still don't want either of them to be like in an 8 or 9 man rotation next year.
Yeah, but because it comes down to the question of like, what is their specific role on a winning team?
Right. So yeah, if you have that where, the bench is struggling and we go through games or a whole period of games where earlier in the season, we're struggling and our bench can't score more than 15 points a game and is one of the worst benches in the league, you definitely need that scorer. And if he can shoot the 3 ball well, that helps open up the game for Anthony and Sharp in that second unit if they're both in there next year. So I don't mind that, but ultimately I think we need players in the rotation that can score a little bit, can shoot the 3 or whatever, but also are at least average defenders at worst. And unfortunately, with this way the team is set up with Dame and Anthony and Sharp, I just don't think you can afford to have non-defending forwards out there.
You know what's funny is, like, we're talking about him. Oh, he's played good in Portland. He's only shot 28% from 3 in Portland before this game. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a little bit higher. But if you're talking about a scoring forward that struggles defensively and doesn't pass, I mean, 28, 29, 30% from 3 is not going to cut it. That's kind of been the problem with Kevin Knox. He's a career 34% three-point shooter, career 42% from 2. The thing is he's finishing a little bit better, but it's just like, he obviously has talent. He's in the league. Anybody in the league has talent, and in a tanking situation, that talent can shine through. But I could see this. I could see this organization just seeing this and being like, oh, we can have him as the 9th man next year. He'll be very cheap, and we can let's just do that, just like they did with Drew Eubanks, right? I can see this organization doing that, and then next year he shoots 30% from 3, struggles to finish like he has kind of throughout his entire career, and then doesn't provide passing or defense, and then we talk about him like, okay, he shouldn't be in the rotation, and then it becomes, okay, we're Kevin Knox haters, but it's not necessarily that. It's just you don't go into next year planning on having him be a part of the rotation. If he comes in next year and a guy gets hurt and then he's a part of the rotation and the Blazers are winning games and he's a part of them winning somehow, then you can have a different conversation. But nothing in regards to this tanking team should be used to formulate the rotation next year outside of Shaden Sharp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think we're going to be talking about using Knox's salary in a trade, so it probably doesn't matter. But if you can just convince like one team that he's not just a throw-in a trade, like he actually has some potential or value, that might be good, I guess. It's not going to be the difference between getting a star or anything, but just, if you're trying to throw in a bunch of our lesser contracts to get someone decent, and it's like not a negative to throw Knox in there, that's fine. But yeah, overall, like I said, I wouldn't be upset if he's on the team next year. I would be if both him and Reddish are in our 9-man rotation. I think that would be a disaster, and we're probably going to be a play-in team at best next year if that's how we're going to approach the offseason.
Yep, and then I see people asking Knox or Winslow. If Winslow's in the rotation to start next year, that's also a disaster.
We don't even know if Winslow's going to be able to play.
We don't even know if he's going to be, healthy enough to play. If he is this latest injury going to zap him a little bit more? Winslow's not a good NBA player. He's not a good NBA player. He's a situational defender and a secondary playmaker, and that's literally it. That's literally it. He's not a guy who defends guards. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He can battle against centers, but man, like some nights he's just not going to get it done simply because he's giving up so much length at that position. And then his passing ability only really is a positive if he's the 5-man and has 4 shooters around him. Like, when he's able to play that role, that small ball center role, and like push the pace and has shooters, he was really good this year. But next to Nurkic, he struggled. Next to Eubanks, he struggled. Especially next to Eubanks. Those lineups were awful to start this season. So it's just, Winslow's another one of those guys where it's like hard to find a role that fits within a winning team. And he can't stay healthy. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. He played 29 games this year. He just recently had a surgery. We're talking about an ankle sprain that will eventually, like, in the long run, it caused him to miss 6 months. Because of an ankle sprain, because his ankle's so messed up, so you can't count on him.
Well, his ankle was so messed up, he had to have, like, a corrective joint surgery. So, like I said, we don't even know if he will ever be able to play at an NBA level again after that surgery. We'll definitely have to see on that one.
Yep. So I don't know. Like, if it comes down to Winslow at $4 million or Knox at $3 million, I'd probably take Knox, but I feel like we could go into next season looking at Knox like we looked at Winslow, and Knox is going to be a part of the rotation, and I just don't want to settle.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the biggest problems, and based on how this season's gone, I mean, you can't convince me that this team didn't want this outcome. Like even when we were playing good, they didn't. We had some injuries. They never signed anyone or they didn't they could have made a trade earlier in the season too, with several guys just to get some depth at certain positions. We had injuries, and they didn't make any kind of moves. So I can't be convinced that this season wasn't designed this way on purpose, but it really does feel like they thought going into the season players like Winslow and Eubanks and were like rotation players on a good team, and they didn't address those problems. We all knew we needed center depth this summer. They didn't address that, right? We knew that Winslow would struggle, shooting the ball and scoring. So, like, if our bench started struggling scoring the ball, like, who's going to score off the bench and who's going to provide spacing for Anthony? We knew all that stuff coming into the season, but the Blazers didn't address any of that. They didn't get any shooting this summer. They didn't get any big man depth. They didn't get any front court defensive players. They signed another 6'3" guard to be our main defender, right? And then he's hurt anyway, so it doesn't matter. So my thing is, like, just don't go into next season with like Knox and Winslow and Eubanks, like, counting on them for minutes. Like, if they're still on the roster, I feel like they're going to feel like they're good enough to do that if they're healthy. And I think that's where this team kind of went wrong. So they need to, in my opinion, just move on from some of those guys. Doesn't necessarily have to be all of them, but just so you don't have that leniency on players that aren't necessarily good enough to be leaned on.
Yeah. I hope that if that was the case with the organization looking at this season that way, then I hope next season's different, man. Because you can't settle in. I don't know. I hope the organization learned something this year, like Chauncey learned something. And obviously tanking is good for the development of a Shaden Sharp because now he gets ample opportunity and in-game reps, right? But it should be something productive for a GM who just has gone through his first full season. Because remember, he was hired after the start of last season.
Mm-hmm.
First full season. In terms of how he built this team this offseason, he really struggled. You can't just look at like a 4-game winning streak before the All-Star break and think that, okay, well, this team can just do that consistently. Sometimes teams will have stretches where they look really good. I mean, Houston every year near the end of the season will have like a 2-week stretch where they look like a playoff caliber team out of the blue once they're like locked into kind of their lottery odds and done tanking, right? But the smart GMs realize that every player is talented and any group of players can have a stretch where they look good on an NBA court because they're NBA players. You can't read too much into it and you have to be smart about it. And I just feel like we took Eubanks basically off the scrap heap, the scrap pile, and he looked solid for a tanking Portland team. Our schedule wasn't even that hard down the stretch last year. We were tanking against some bad teams last year at times. Our schedule was much harder down the stretch of this season than it was last year, so that made it a little bit easier. But you can't just look at Drew Eubanks last year and Justise Winslow during that 4-game winning streak and think, oh, well, we can just have those guys do that consistently because they've been in the league. You have a much bigger sample size. As a GM, if you're talking about play over 4 games, 10 games, 20 games, when they've played 100 games at least before that in their career, you should probably pay more attention to those 100 games because it's the larger sample size. Statistically, there is a problem, and it creates outliers and noise when you shrink the sample size. So it's the same thing when analyzing players over a 10-game, 20-game sample compared to what they've done their entire career. And that's why when we got, a Cam Reddish who's played 150 games, it's like, okay, even if he looks good the last, 10 or 20 games this season, he's been who he's been for 150 games, Like, sure, sometimes you can get a player that will change in a new location, but guess what? Portland has not been that location in the past 5-6 years for guys. We haven't. Who have we fixed that has struggled before coming here? Who have we fixed? Who have we turned into like a good rotation player on a winning team who wasn't before he got here?
Yeah, I think probably Nurk was alright, but that was.
But he was young.
That was more due to Jokic blocking him.
He started at times for Denver. He had some impressive moments in Denver, and he was in the middle of his 3rd season. He was right. Younger than Cam Reddish was.
Trevor says Mo Harkless, but yeah, we're talking 8 years ago now.
Yeah, 8 years ago, and Harkless was his 2nd season he got here? No,
Zach
his 4th. You're right. Harkless is a good example.
Zach brings up Hood. He was not playing well in Cleveland. Was out of the rotation.
But he had shown in Utah that he could be a good NBA rotation player. He had like a couple years where he was a really good scorer in Utah. I remember him cooking us on opening night in Portland. I remember going to that game and just being really impressed. So he struggled, but it was more so a dip. It wasn't where he had struggled his entire career and then we took him off the scrap heap and turned him into a good player. He had shown that he could be a good player at the NBA level.
Khalid asks, isn't that what we're doing with Mays right now?
What chance has Mays gotten?
Well, I would say this though, but at least with Tori and I, when I talk about Mays, it's just as like a third point guard.
Mm-hmm. Not a rotation guy.
And what did we say about Eubanks all summer? You know, like if he's our third string point guard or third string center, not point guard, but
he wishes.
if he's a third string center next year, that's fine. But if he's your backup going into the season, that team's not going anywhere. So, yeah, it's that. I think that's the difference. We're not trading for like Skylar Mays and thinking he's going to all of a sudden become, you know, Paul George, like Cam Reddish people were saying, and like after not showing anything in the NBA, he just hasn't gotten a legit chance. But yeah, we're talking into the bench guys. It's different than guys we're talking about that could actually be in the rotation, and that's the problem that Cronin did. And this is why I freaking hate everyone every time it's brought up. He told us we weren't going to contend this year. Yeah, no crap, because he made crappy moves. Like you don't get to say, oh, I'm going to be bad at my job. Be bad at your job, and then say, well, I told you I was going to be bad, so what did you expect? Like no, that's not an excuse. Like you literally thought that these guys were going to be rotational players, and you were wrong, and you didn't shore up any of your holes. Like I said, it might have all been by design. Like they may not have had any intention on winning this season, even though they swore they did. But like I think it's just he's got to put up, because like every single player on this roster, he's either signed, traded for, or signed an extension to. Dame and Little are the only two that were on the roster that he signed an extension to that weren't actual free agents yet. So he could have gotten off of Nurk last year. He could have done something different at center this year. He could have chose not to go with the Dame and Anthony backcourt and made a big trade that way at any point. But he chose this path. He chose to go with the small backcourt. He chose to go with a rookie this last year. And now those decisions may pay off if you make good moves on top of that. But you can't have another summer of making these moves with players who, from day one, you know, are not good enough for a contending roster if they're your backups.
Yep, there's a comment in chat saying, I'm giving Cronin a break if he does well this offseason. Cronin got a Sharp, which is by far bigger than any mistake he's made. Here's why I don't agree with that line of thinking. Shaden Sharp was, just if you look at consensus, was the top player on the board with the 7th pick. And the draft is a crapshoot. Every GM who's around for like a decade will hit on someone and miss on someone. So just basing a GM, you know, like taking that too much into account, I think is a mistake. I think there's a lot of GMs that are overrated or underrated because of their draft hits or draft mistakes. I don't think the draft should be taken into account as much as it should, because a big part of the draft is your scouting department, and then a big part of your draft picks panning out is your developmental coaches. So, like, with Sharp being the consensus top player on the board, Dame wanting him, supposedly, like, they had worked out behind the scenes before the draft, I'm not going to give Cronin too much credit and excuse moves that Cronin has total control over, like who's the backup center or what trades he's making, because that's where GMs really make their pay, in my opinion. Go ahead.
In my opinion, the credit to me is not trading that pick, I guess. So that was ultimately a good decision. But then, like I said, I see all these same people saying, oh, we have to trade the pick this year. We can't draft another rookie or whatever. It's like, well, if you had that mindset, that all of you same people who are saying that now, we wouldn't have Sharp, and you all love Sharp, right? You all love Sharp.
People were trying to convince us that we should trade the 7th pick for Jerami Grant. Now people are trying to convince us that we should let Jerami Grant walk for nothing. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not saying those are the same people. It's just kind of wild how we were the ones saying last year, no, the 7th pick is too valuable. The 7th pick is way too valuable to give up for, for Grant or OG even, right? And now it's like a year later, okay, you guys see why that pick was so valuable, right? Because You ain't getting a guy with this anywhere close to this level of upside, true star upside, any other way.
Yeah.
Unless you're trading 1 million assets for somebody that's already a star.
Yeah. So Blazer fan wanted to update us in saying that Cronin deserves the credit for tanking last season. Okay, anyone could have done that, right? He's saying we only got the pick because Cronin chose the direction to take the season away.
I mean, we sucked.
Well,
we sucked.
Dame got hurt.
And Dame got hurt.
Yeah,
so, I mean, Dame had never gotten hurt under Olshey like that. And the team sucked. The team that Olshey built sucked. And maybe part of that was due to a new head coach. Maybe part of that was due to, just guys not giving effort. Like, who knows? But that wasn't Cronin, and that's what led to the tank. Mm-hmm. So I think Olshey absolutely would have tanked last year the same way. I think Olshey absolutely would.
Olshey did tank, actually. That's not true. The year we got CJ McCollum, we owed the pick, and we lost, the last 13 games of the season, I believe. Yeah. After we were in the playoff chase, pretty much up until the playoff, until the All-Star break, Dame's rookie year, and then pulled the chute after that.
He says, no, the team didn't suck. They won 4 games in a row.
That's exactly
in all caps.
We almost beat Memphis in Memphis the other night too. If we had to sit Sharp the last 8 minutes of that game to be Memphis would win, like that's.
I literally just talked about not overreacting to small sample sizes. But we're going to overreact to what are we talking about here? Stop talking in all caps, bro.
Cronin pulled the plug partially because...
I can't with all caps.
But Cronin only decided to pull the plug because Dame had surgery, right? Like, if Dame doesn't go down, there's no way they're pulling the plug, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, this year was easy. We won 33 games... and have 5th best odds. Bro, I don't think there's ever been a year where the 5th worst team had 33 wins. That's a lot of wins.
And that Dame being hurt allowed Cronin to justify his crappy trades and clearing the deck for flexibility, $60 million in cap space, according to Woj last summer. Like, they were preaching all that. So, we were ravaged by COVID in December. The season was spiraling out of control. They never really got it together, and that was the right decision. So, yes, credit to Cronin for recognizing that and doing that. But I don't think it's like something that only he thought of, or like any GM wouldn't have done the same if they were in our if we had any GM last season, they would have recognized that season was a wash and that it was best for us moving forward to keep the pick and not have it go to Chicago and all that kind of stuff. Same with this season. So once we realized that this season was not working out, but at the same time, like, he shouldn't get credit for pulling the plug this season because he never gave this team a legit chance with actual depth and roster moves either. So I feel like this season was more because he had to, because he didn't do a good enough job.
Yep. Shout out Pineapples, member for 17 months, says 17 for Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Pineapples. Yep, 17 for Sharp. And then Oscar with a $5 dono says, get Wemby so we don't have to talk Ant trade anymore. Well, I wish it was that simple. He says, or Shea versus Ant, he kills that convo. I feel it sets us up for a trade we can make, not have to make. Yeah, I mean, Wemby defensively kind of changes the conversation with this team. So with Wemby, I feel like you start analyzing things through a little bit of a different lens. Thank you, Oscar, for the $5 dono. But obviously, Wemby is we just hope and dream for Wemby at this point. We'll have a Tankathon sim soon. But, yeah, I mean, if Cronin does great this offseason, obviously that'll help him. You know what I mean? That'll help him in my eyes. That'll help him in your eyes. Like, yeah, this offseason, he can't go into it. Because here's the thing. With this organization, the biggest problem has been just settling for the same roster when we shouldn't, settling for the same coach when we shouldn't, maybe settling for the same GM when we shouldn't, right? Settling for Mario Hezonja being a part of the rotation, Nick Stauskas being the part of the rotation, settling for just, oh, we made the playoffs 8-9 years in a row. That's great. You know, just settling for being a mediocre playoff team, okay? Settling for Drew Eubanks to be part of the rotation. Settling for Justise Winslow being a part of the rotation. Settling for absolute crap in the Norm Powell-Robert Covington trade. Settling for a pick that wasn't protected as well as it should have been in the CJ McCollum trade. The biggest problem with this organization for the longest time has been settling. That's why it's super frustrating to hear Joe Cronin sit there and say, well, you know, it's not a one-year rebuild, like basically tempering expectations. Cronin basically admitted that they're just going to settle instead of really trying to be good enough. And people are like, oh, that's fine. He said he's going to settle, so it's okay that he settles. No, that's what we've been doing for longer than ever, okay? So this offseason, my opinion on Joe Cronin will be dependent upon whether or not he settles. If he settles for Kevin Knox being a part of the rotation or Cam Reddish being a part of the rotation, I'm going to be frustrated because I'm tired of this organization settling. That's all they've done for as long as I can remember.
Yep. So Sam Stone asked, does Cronin get any credit for the Grant trade?
It's tough because Grant wanted to come here and Grant had a handshake agreement with Detroit's front office that they would trade him somewhere he wants to go. And he wanted to come here because Dame he's cool with and Dame was in his ear. And that goes back to the whole Olympic run. So, I mean, I understand why people would give him credit because he made the trade happen. But it's like, it's not like he out-negotiated 10 other teams and like still gave up a few amount of assets and took a win like that. It was basically like, oh, Grant wants to come here and Detroit's willing to listen to him. So, okay, we get to trade this Milwaukee first for him. Like, it basically fell in his lap.
Yeah, and so I give him credit in the sense that trade basically saved his offseason. If we didn't get Grant, and it was because the Milwaukee pick wasn't enough to get him, or like you said earlier, we had to give up 7 to get him or something, and we don't have Sharp right now because we had made the trade for Grant. So he got lucky that Detroit prioritized, like you said, they had an agreement to get him to where he wanted to go. So Grant was able to leverage his way here. And then also that happened to be what the Pistons needed, was that trade exception or that salary dump to get Jalen Duren, who they really wanted.
Yeah, the most credit I think you can give him was generating the TPE to absorb Grant, because that is something he actively did.
Yeah, and but like he didn't really do anything. Like, let's just say we got the 8th pick or whatever it ended up being, or let's just say it ended up being the 12th pick that we got in that trade instead of the Milwaukee pick. I mean, the Detroit would have accepted that pick for him too. So he just got lucky that the Milwaukee pick was enough, because at the deadline they tried to make that part of the CJ trade, just have that lottery pick go to them. They actually tried to trade Hart to Detroit at the time. So let's not forget that as well. And they also pumped up that trade as, oh, we got a Josh Hart, and if we had a Josh Hart at every position, and they just then all of a sudden a few months later it's like, oh, we're not re-signing Josh, so we have to get rid of him, like so we'll see what he does from that. But I mean, there's still a possibility Grant walks, or you have to pay him a ridiculous contract. Which is
the problem that we foresaw, and people were like, people got on us about not wanting the perfect forward for this Blazer team, and now it seems like a lot of people are worried about this upcoming contract for him or him potentially walking, because you're basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. You either probably have to overpay him or you lose him for nothing. They can't lose him for nothing. The Blazers don't have enough assets to let what is honestly still the best forward Dame's played with since LaMarcus Aldridge. You can't let him walk for nothing. You have to pay him. You have to pay him. I mean, honestly, at this point, Grant could probably leverage the Blazers into giving him a max contract. And I'd rather give him a max contract than let him walk for nothing, because if he walks for nothing, then, I mean, if Dame is ever going to ask out, if it's because, we're not going to pay Jerami Grant, who you wanted to have come here, and after this season, you basically can't let Grant walk. Grant has all the leverage in this situation. So
but if he does, we got what? Cam Reddish, but then if Cam walks too, we got the 23rd pick, so we maybe get our picks back from Chicago for trading CJ. So we basically use CJ to undo a first that we got from Larry Nance.
Yeah.
Or we gave up for Larry Nance.
It basically would be this. We traded a Larry Nance and CJ essentially for Grant and the Knicks first, and then we let Grant walk and trade the Knicks first back for our first that we traded for Larry Nance. So basically, in the end, it would be trading...
Nothing.
It would be... No. It would be worse than nothing. In the end, it would be we traded CJ and Larry Nance to undo the initial Larry Nance Jr. trade.
Which wasn't even that bad of a trade.
Which wasn't even that. It's just the protections on that pick. That would be on Cronin. That would be absolutely on Cronin. But you know what's so ridiculous about this, Eric, is like now Grant's in this situation and you're stuck or whatever. The fact that he was willing to give up a lottery pick plus Hart for Grant. A lottery pick plus Hart's turned into a future first, or Hart's turned into the 23rd pick this year. He was willing to give up a lottery pick in the 23rd pick for Grant with a year left, potentially losing him for nothing. That's not great. You know, you look at what OKC did with a late lottery pick in this past year's draft. They got Jalen Williams. I'd probably rather have Jalen Williams right now than Jerami Grant, given his contract status. It's cheap. He's been a good NBA player this year, and he's only a rookie. So that's the thing, you know? Now, obviously, you have to identify the right guy. We could have taken Ousmane Dieng, and then it's a different conversation, right? Because he's more of a project. He could still pan out, but that was the guy taken before Jalen Williams, so obviously, you know, drafting the right guy matters. But it's just, we're not in a better position than we were other than getting Sharp. If not for Sharp, we're in a worse position than we were. In Sharp, we got just by losing games. It's not like we did anything trade-wise or whatever to get him.
Yeah, so this is where I'll tie this into the Anthony versus Shaden thing. Because you get better by adding talent to your talent. You do not get better as a team for swapping out good players for other good players or giving up assets to get different assets. You add to your assets, you add to your good players using other assets that aren't part of your core. Like, for example, the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Donovan Mitchell trade. They don't give up Garland, Allen, or Mobley in that trade, right? They get Donovan Mitchell without giving up their main players. You have to add to that. And unfortunately, for small market teams like Portland, this may change with some of the new CBA rules, but the only real way to do that is through the draft, unless you just get a no-brainer trade or a trade like the Nurkic trade just happens to pan out, or the Jerami Grant trade. Those kind of things you want to be available for. So the credit for Olshey and Cronin was like those trades, they made them, you know, and they got that talent for basically very little going out. But the problem is now that we're in this position where we need to take that next step, you have to use your assets to get that piece that fits in with your talents. So in my opinion, like, it's fine if you think Anthony should be traded for a star or whatever. Like, that's cool. But you can't just go into it saying we have to trade them, because that's where you start getting less value in trades because teams know you're desperate. And that's also where you miss out on a player like Shaden Sharp or the next player that could help this team have a huge ceiling. Because if we trade like the 6th pick or like 3rd pick or whatever pick we end up getting, assuming it's not Wemby, if we trade that pick and it's for like an OG player, it's a good move. Like, yes, our team is better next year.
Well, let me ask this.
The ceiling of the team is different if, say, Brandon Miller or one of the Thompson twins hits their ceiling and is a good player or a star. Like, that is how, like, I know it's a small chance either way, very, very minute chance, but if you hit another Sharp level player in this draft, it won't matter how old Dame is or if he deteriorates in a couple of years. Like, this team might be good enough to contend in a couple of years, even with Dame aging. And if you just throw in Dame with less responsibility as he gets older to a really good young team, I don't see why fans think that that's like the end of the world. And if we have that happen, it's like over for sure for the Dame era or whatever. Because look at it this year. He wanted to trade the 7th pick last summer, and by the time of the draft, he was in love with Sharp, wanted us to draft Sharp, didn't want us to overpay for OG and all that kind of stuff. And I know he's made comments about wanting to get stuff done this summer, but what if the same thing happens this summer where he finds another player that he really likes in that draft, and he thinks that they can help, and he notices now how much Sharp can contribute in just 1 year next year for us. I'd look at that kind of stuff.
Yep. So I'm running a hypothetical thought process right now, Eric. So I did a chat poll. Would you just, I know Toronto would have to include like another salary to make a match, but hypothetically, would you trade Anthony Simons for OG Anunoby right now? Okay. For the people that voted yes, okay, 1 year from now, are you prepared to give OG Anunoby a max contract?
And for Andy and Woo and people saying Ant for Bridges straight up, like the Nets are not doing that this summer. They're just not.
Yeah, forget about Bridges right now. I'm asking you guys. He's unrestricted, so he could leave, and he could probably leverage the Blazers into having to pay him a max, much like this whole Jerami Grant situation we just talked about. So, if you say that you're willing to trade Ant for OG, my question is, are you willing to give OG a max contract next offseason?
After giving Jeremy $30 million this summer too.
Yes.
Well, so Andy also says that they'll have the new extension thing, so he's 140% eligible. That doesn't mean he's going to accept it though, just like Jerami Grant this year.
Yeah, OG Anunoby's probably more wanted than Jerami Grant is. So if any of you said you would trade Anthony Simons for OG Anunoby straight up, but you wouldn't be prepared to give him a max contract, then what are you doing? What are you doing? Because then you have a good risk of losing OG Anunoby for nothing, and in the end, you're trading Anthony Simons for nothing. So what is... You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, is people just look at, like, Anthony Simons for OG Anunoby makes sense because then you could start Sharp at the 2, and then OG Anunoby could be like that perfect fit at the 3. Okay, yes, but OG Anunoby's a free agent next offseason. He supposedly wants a bigger role than he has offensively in Toronto right now, which we couldn't give him. And he could probably demand close to, if not a max contract. Those things matter. Because that's the thing, is this is exactly how people viewed Jerami Grant last offseason is, oh, he can score, he can shoot, and he can defend. It'd be amazing. Okay, yeah, all right. But now all those people are like, oh, wait. He's a free agent. He might get a max contract.
We can't pay him $30 million a year.
We can't pay him that much. So that's why I asked this question, is because we literally just went through this cycle with one trade target. OG Anunoby would be the same exact thing, except instead of trading Milwaukee first for Grant, where it's like, okay, you didn't give much up, you're trading Ant for him?
Also, OG's injury prone.
Mm-hmm.
So you're throwing that into the equation as well.
So that's why I asked that question, is because it's the entire conversation we just had with Grant is OG Anunoby if we do that, but the downside is much higher. The upside, I guess, maybe, if you get a Wemby, you contend, but you know what I mean? This is this type of stuff we have to think about when we're talking trades, guys. And this is the type of stuff where, like, me and you will think about it, Eric, but then people will be like, oh, you guys don't want OG Anunoby? You're insane. He'd be great for us. That's not the conversation. The conversation is about the position we'd be put in with OG Anunoby being a free agent next offseason, just like we're the position we're in with Grant right now.
Yeah, and I mean, let's just say we ignored the rebounding thing and the bad fit, but if we were talking about just on a normal team where we didn't have Grant as the power forward, I would now say that Turner might be a little better trade target than he was last year because of his contract being figured out. And Indiana found a way to pay him what he deserves without increasing his contract for the next 2 seasons. They basically just front loaded it all into this season when they had cap space, which was a really smart move. And now Miles Turner has a ton more trade value, but the problem is now he's going to cost a lot more. So you're going to have to give up a lot more to get him this summer if you do that trade. So that kind of throws that out. But that's an example of if like Jerami Grant wouldn't have been on his last year of his deal where he could have leveraged it a little bit like that, he probably doesn't go for a Milwaukee 2025 first, we probably have to give up number 7 or something if we want a player like that. So
yeah, the risks are baked into the value given up in the trade. But that's kind of the point with the whole would you trade Ant for OG right now question.
And that's I did talk about this, I forget if it was last post game or the one before that, but in a scenario where we kept basically everyone but Nurkic and bench guys like Nas, Keon, Knox, those kind of guys, and used a bunch of future picks and just overpaid for OG and Claxton. The problem is that both of those guys would then be free agents after next year, and what are you having to pay them? And if you already have Grant and Anthony and Dame under contract and then are paying both of those guys like 25, 30 or more million a year, like all of a sudden we're in that super tax range, and we're talking about like the Warriors being limited on moves because of our lineup. Now it might be good enough to contend or whatever, so maybe it's worth it. But that is definitely something that a lot of people don't consider when they just talk about trading for players.
Yep, and there's a comment that says, why wouldn't anybody here pay OG? Well, the thing is, if you're willing to give him a max contract, then I understand why you'd be willing to trade Anthony Simons for him if you think that highly of OG. It's not necessarily about what is he worth. That's not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is there's a lot of people out there, I feel like, that would trade Anthony Simons for an OG Anunoby, but then a year from now would be like, we can't pay him a max. And it's just the whole initial thing in their mind is a little short-sighted because they're not actually willing to do what it takes to keep the asset that they traded a really good player, a really good young player for. So that's the thing is, we try and bring a more long-sighted view to this organization trying to build this Blazer roster because a lot of the talk, I feel like, is a little too short-sighted and doesn't take into things like the whole Grant situation into account. It was just, we need to add Grant. We need to get damn help. Okay, yes, but you have to do it smartly. The problem is this organization hasn't been super great about doing it smartly. And if you like this type of talk, this is the channel for you, because this is really what we try and focus on, is the in-depth parts of deals and the long-term effects of them. And me and Eric have both studied the CBA. We're going to have to do some more studying sometime soon.
Gonna have to nerd out this summer.
Yep, but that's the thing, is like, this conversation isn't even necessarily me stating my own opinion. It's about how you have to analyze that potential trade beyond just giving up Simons for OG, beyond just how would it look on the court next year. So that's what we try, and that's the type of conversations we try to have here. If you're into that, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that this offseason. We'll have videos kind of going in depth like this. And that's the thing. He might not get a max. I'm not even saying he'll get a max. I'm saying you have to be prepared for it, though.
Right.
He's the type of guy where it's like you have to be ready, because he's a team, like half the league would want him.
And I don't understand why fans can't recognize that it's the exact same situation as the Jerami Grant, right? And like, you can't want to trade for him and then be okay with him walking for nothing a year later. Like, you just can't. Like, so you either have to be all in, up to a max contract, whatever it takes, or that's not a guy you trade for. Like,
we said the same with Jerami Grant.
Yeah, there is no in between, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
said the same with Jerami Grant. Now we're here.
I thought, okay, so yeah, the Jerami Grant trade. So we knew he could be offered for 112, or like 112.6 million, 112.6 million, when after 6 months. So it was like, January 6th or something like that. So we knew that date was coming. When we made that trade, I was like, oh, please do not give him all of that, right? Like, that's $28 million a year for Grant. And then he plays, really well at the beginning of the season. And then it becomes, oh, please take that and don't make it be more than that. Like, oh my goodness, that's like 28 million is a lot, but like, that's fine now, but do not give him like 35 million a year or something. So, yeah, but like I said, once you made that move, you're stuck. Whatever the going rate for him, or whatever it costs to retain him and keep him happy here, you have to do it. So, yeah.
And that's why I want Wemby so bad.
And on top of all this, we don't even know if Jody would go into the tax, even if we could get OG and Claxton and make all these. Like, let's say we didn't even have to give up anyone important and we got all these good players. Like, we don't even know if Jody would pay them and go into the tax.
And I mean, obviously we really want Wemby just because of he's a freaking phenomenal prospect, but also it kind of solves the problem. You get a bunch of defensive help at a cheap price, rookie contract, and he's going to be a star. So, knock on wood, I don't see him not being a star unless he gets injured, so that's why I'm knocking on wood. But Wemby solves so many issues, so many issues, and that's why winning the lottery would just be amazing for this team. Obviously, it's going to be amazing for anyone because Wemby's phenomenal, but with the tight constraints on the salaries, getting good rookie talent, Jalen Williams would be phenomenal to have right now, a role player that's really good, that's making what, like $4 million, $5 million a year, solve some issues. Yep.
I think it actually makes less than that, but
yeah, I know Sharp made 6 this year, so I think like $4 million probably is what Jalen Williams is making.
Evans Enthusiast says, when is trading allowed? Technically after 3 o'clock tomorrow ish. There are 10 teams that are allowed to trade.
Yeah. And
then after the playing games, there'll be 14 teams allowed to trade. But
trades never happen in
there's
April,
rarely a trade before the draft lottery. So usually May 16th would be the earliest that trades start to happen. But once you're eliminated, you can start making moves and stuff.
Yep. Anyway, I'll end that poll. Anything else on that whole conversation?
the thing is, Sharp's a different type of player. It obviously has star upside, but it doesn't. What's our problem right now with when people say the small backcourt can't work? What they mean the defense, right? Defensively, it doesn't work, right? And Sharp, I mean, like, I hope that he can become a good defender, but if we have Sharp starting next year instead of Anthony, with all things else being equal, the defense is at best the same as it was this year. And so
people just assume that Sharp's a better defender because he's taller.
Yeah, so we still have a backcourt problem. It's
not an undersized backcourt problem.
Someone who's literally an inch and a little bigger standing reach. But
that inch matters, Eric. Don't let him tell you differently.
Yeah. It's the motion in the ocean, right? Yeah. But no, it's just a case where that's what I'm saying. Like, good teams, like even the Warriors, they have Jordan Poole, right? And I don't think Jordan Poole is as good as either Anthony or Sharp has the promise to be. But like, they didn't just like trade him because they already had two guards, you know? Like you can make it work with those three. And and Sharp's not Norm Powell size either, so he can play the three a little better so it's like a little less burden there that ways too. But yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. The bar is higher for Ant than it is for Sharp. And when Ant had his breakout last season, people loved him. And it was like, trade CJ so you can start Ant. And I told people that a year from now, you guys are going to be saying the same thing about Ant that you were about CJ. And that's exactly what's happened with a lot of people. A lot of people that were super high on Ant are now treating him like he was CJ. And what's the new thing now? It's Shaden Sharp. Guess what? If we trade Ant this offseason and have Sharp come in, all of a sudden the bar's really high for Sharp. We've had a shooting guard that's a 20-point per game scorer the last who knows how many years. Ant kept up with that, okay? Sharp offensively is held to that level automatically just by being the replacement for the guy who was the replacement for the guy that was a 20-point per game scorer. The defense, I mean, Sharp is not good defensively. So we go into next year, it's the same defense of our backcourt. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if some of the same people started treating Sharp like Ant right now. And people thought I was crazy when I said that about Ant and CJ. Unless they already agreed. So I don't know, man. It's always funny how the new shiny thing is always so much better than what you got. And this isn't to downplay Sharp. This is more so just about narratives that people have. They just get so excited about the new thing. But then once the new thing becomes, a starter, and all of a sudden has a much higher bar, then they start to get frustrated. It happened with Ant. I wouldn't be surprised for some people if it happened with Sharp. But the thing is, probably wouldn't happen to the same extent because he is 6'5", and that looks good on a stat sheet, on a starter lineup. 6'5" shooting guard, just has a nice ring to it.
DJ Vega says, to be fair, Sharp shown more potential defensively than Simons did at that age. Yeah, all the blown missed assignments. That's really people just see the blocks. It's the same as Eubanks. And Ed Halen says, wrong, Sharp might be our best defender. Wow,
yeah, you're trolling.
That's like Carmelo Anthony level now.
We're going to have Sharp stands soon?
We used to have people come in here and tell us that Carmelo Anthony was our best defender the 2 years he was here, man. It's just crazy.
I mean, Sharp has played 78 games this year. He's averaging 0.3 blocks per game. But that's why he has
but they're
potential.
Highlight blocks. They're highlight.
Yeah. That's like what where like what do people mean when they say Sharp has a bunch of defensive potential? Like, I don't even necessarily disagree with that. I think he has potential, but he's not close. He's not close. Like, he has potential because of his wingspan and his, height, right? He's bigger.
I'm encouraged by it, but okay, but let's just say
he's not close. Like, people say that going into next year, like, oh, Sharp has the potential to be a much better defender, as if that's like a present thing. That's like he'd have to take a huge jump. And I guess you can't rule it out. I mean, look at the jump he took this year, but he'd have to take a huge jump defensively. It's more of a futuristic conversation, and I feel like people view it as like Sharp's going to be the better defender next year, for sure.
Well, okay, let's just say hypothetically, people are right, and that Sharp takes a huge jump defensively next year, right? And he's all of a sudden keeping guys in front of him, not missing as many assignments because he got the reps this year, and just really improves based on, we've seen offensively his film study lead to direct implications on the court of improvement. Let's just say that's correct. Why couldn't he be the 3 then?
Yeah.
Why does he have to do that as the 2? Like, why couldn't he be our on-ball defender then in that group? And that kind of takes some of the pressure off of him offensively too, so we can use more effort on defense.
And let me just say this too. If your argument for why a dude is a good defender starts with the word steals or blocks, your argument sucks. Okay? No offense, but your argument sucks. There's a comment in chat that says, he does it all. Gets steals, blocks, and locks down. I mean, I haven't seen him lock down anyone, but if you're talking about steals and blocks as your first 2 reasons why he's good defensively, only 1.7% of Shaden Sharp's defensive possessions end with a steal or block. So you're valuing that 1.7% over the other 98.3% of his defensive possessions. That doesn't make sense. At all. Please tell me how that makes any sort of logical sense. If you're making an argument because, he's in the right position most of the time, and he slides his feet well and keeps guys in front of him, guess what? That is something that will happen on almost every possession. Steals and blocks rarely happen. Like, Sharp, 1.7% of his defensive possessions. I care about that other 98.3%. Here's the thing. A lot of guys like that will sacrifice a larger percentage of defensive possessions just trying to chase those steals and blocks that they get 2% of the time.
So Ed says, someone show this guy Shaden's defensive mixtape. That's exactly what we're talking about. Don't talk about highlight things, because highlight things lead to people thinking Eubanks is a lockdown defender too. But Jonathan Ever says, I think the upside comments are from flashes like when we saw him stopping SGA from driving to the rim on several possessions. Okay, completely agree with that. I think Sharp has massive upside on the defensive end. Now, with pretty much every NBA player in the history of the NBA, that all comes down to work ethic, effort, and wanting to be good on defense. Because I've seen players with no athleticism be some of the best defenders in the entire league. And I've seen players with the most athleticism comparable to Sharp's, maybe not comparable to Sharp's because he's in another level maybe, but like I've seen every year the most athletic players in every draft be horrible defenders.
Gerald Green.
And so it just comes down to whether you want it. But the other thing I'll say about that is I also saw those same flashes and upside. Anthony Simons getting through screens, becoming a point of attack defender this year. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't 100% of the time, but he was maybe our best player this year getting through screens, and that's been a huge problem this entire season. and no one says crap about him improving on defense this year or showing stuff because they bring up his defensive rating, which isn't even a real stat for individual players, even though like some people try to make it out to be. So like Ant was playing dang good defense. He was playing good defense. If you say like OKB says Simons plays no D, that is absolutely false. You guys are just automatically assume Blazers are bad at defense. It has to be their small backcourt because there's no other explanation, right? There's no other explanation. We tried this with Dame and CJ. They always sucked on defense. So why do we just do the same thing? And it's obviously they're too small to play good defense. Not even accounting for the lack of size and defense at other positions and stuff like that. The fact that Dame and Ant are constantly having to play under the rim against bigger guys in our system, the crappy Chauncey zone where they're the bottom two guys. It's just horrible.
Not even accounting for when we had Matisse Thybulle and Cam Reddish as the starting 2 and 3 for a stretch, and we're just as bad defensively.
Right. But like people just assume that it's Anthony's fault and he plays no defense. Like if you just, because I do this, I sit there and watch. I watch guys move off ball and stuff like that. And I'm not saying people don't do that, but if you just tell me like Anthony doesn't play D, like it's just false because like I watch him. He actually tries. He moves his butt on defense. He gets through screens. He improved a lot on defense going into this season. He was one of the worst defenders in the league the last couple seasons. And he was like DJ Vegas says, we're actually worse defensively ever since Simons was out with injury and stuff like that. So yeah, like this, it's not the backcourt. It's the fact that they don't have the right players in the right position, and they've never found that small forward that can do the things like even a Mo Harkless did a few years ago. They have yet to find that guy. They tried to make Jerami Grant that guy this year, and that's just not his strength. And that's why our defense ultimately sucked. It was okay for a while when teams hadn't figured out the zone yet, because it was gimmicky and not many teams faced that kind of zone on like a night in, night out basis. But once the team started to realize how they could punish that zone, it just got obliterated, and we never made an adjustment, never changed our defensive schemes or anything like that. And then we tried to plug in players like Thybulle, like you said, and think that it's going to be different all of a sudden, and it just didn't. So I think the difference is we need players that complement the backcourt, and I think it's fine. It's been fine in the past. The Dame and CJ had a top 10 defense with Mo Harkless, Al-Farouq Amino, and Yusuf Nurkic as their front court. It's not that difficult, but you have to have the right scheme and you have to have the right roster, and that's where Cronin failed, and that's where Chauncey's failed. And until those two things get addressed, either Chauncey has to coach better and Cronin needs to get a better roster around those guys. Yes, I agree. It'll never work if we keep running out like Drew Eubanks and Justise Winslow and Cam Reddish type players. Like if we keep running those kind of guys out, that's where it's not going to happen, man. It's just not going to happen.
Yep. And then there's a comment from Artelli who says, who are the right players then? Who's this magical small forward that fills all these needs and we get without trading anyone of value? Nobody's saying we're going to get a small forward without trading anyone of value. I don't know where you got that last part from, but the whole point of this conversation is that just taking out Ant and putting in Sharp, there's no reason to think that's better defensively or going to be better defensively. The only reason people think that is because that extra inch of height and, a little bit longer wingspan, or I don't know what Ant's wingspan is, but that's the point of this conversation. Now, if you can trade Ant for that perfect small forward and start Sharp, okay, do it. Sure, if it's the right trade, but that's the point, and that's what I've been trying to hammer home on Twitter and on streams, is it's about what can we add, not we have to get rid of Ant because of Sharp. It's literally like, okay, we got one talented youngster, and now all of a sudden we got another really high upside talented youngster, so we got to get rid of the first one. And the conversation is focused on subtraction. It's not focused on addition. I've seen it throughout this chat, this whole stream, and previous streams. We have to get rid of Ant. Somebody told me today, not trading Ant this offseason would be a travesty. I was told that today, word for word. And it's all about we have to get rid of Ant because the defense isn't going to work, so we got to start Sharp. But Sharp's not better right now. And yeah, you can say Sharp has shown flashes, but Ant's also shown flashes. So that's the whole point of this conversation.
Ryan says you guys are playing too much into obvious. Bro, have you been on social media? That's all people talk about is how Simons has to go. Simons has to go. Nurkic has to go. Actually, Tori, you know what's funny?
What?
Aeromancer, I don't know if he's in here right now, but he posted a clip earlier today about you. This is before the trade deadline. I think it was sometime in like January. Mm-hmm. And you said that if the Blazers make a trade, you would guarantee that, or not guarantee, but like you thought if you had to make a prediction, it would be with Charlotte. And now technically they did make a trade in that three-way trade with Charlotte.
Yeah.
But I kept listening for a minute, and you know what the next thing we talked about?
What?
You said, I forgot the guy's name. Someone in chat says, I guarantee Simons is not on the team after the trade deadline. He has to go. And you said something like, I guarantee he is, or something like that. And, so yeah, it's like, I don't know, people just all over the face talking about this.
I forgot about that. Yep. I need to start taking screenshots when people guarantee things. I wonder who it was.
Yeah, so people ask who that is. Honestly, Hendricks and Lively would improve our defense next year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that complicated. Like, get a couple of young guys who understand defense and have the energy and are going to come in with that defensive mindset from day one. And like those are two guys we could probably easily get with a little bit of maneuvering maybe around the draft board, but not something you'd have to give up any players for, basically, with the way we position ourselves, right? I'm not saying that should be our end goal or whatever, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's that complicated to get players. And for those who keep saying, "Oh, give us players that like who could we get without giving up those guys though?" Well, we talk about that every freaking show. So like obviously you guys don't.
You gotta give up something to get something. We're not blind to that. That's not the specific point of this conversation.
I've talked a lot about overpaying for Claxton because he's at $8.5 million, so it's someone you could match with like Nas and Keon and picks for.
But that trade would be about getting Claxton.
Right, we get Claxton, but it's not. Oh, we have to get better at another player, so we have to trade Anthony to get Claxton or whatever. No, you go out and get Claxton, and then you have a mobile switching big, rim running big who can catch lobs, rebounds, and switch onto any guard with consistency and be good. And then all of a sudden you have that kind of thing. DJ Vega brings up like a Draymond Green.
Super unrealistic.
You'd have to find a way to bring in a third team that could take on salary because that's the only way they're trading him. And I still don't know if Golden State would trade with us still right now, or we'd trade with Golden State. Yeah. But yeah, Draymond, I mean, obviously like that kind of player that would be an instant like floor general on defense and just control the whole defense and prop it up. Like that type of player would obviously help, but I'm trying to be like more on the realistic side of things, just like easy targets to get. But couple of guys like Hart and Payton, well, we didn't use those guys right when we were here, and one of them was hurt, so yeah.
If we're confident we can be contenders, then we can start talking about potentially overpaying because it gets us somewhere we really want to be, right? So it's like if we have to give up a ton for McHale and Claxton, and it's like Ant, the second pick, and, future first, which is probably an overpay, but if we had confidence, hypothetically, that Dame, Sharp, McHale, Grant, and Claxton could be a contender, then you can have that conversation and maybe be willing to overpay. So that's the thing, is obviously you have to give up something to get something, but that's the thing, is that whole conversation is built around what can we do to get Claxton and Bridges, and do those guys make us a contender? It's about addition and actually getting somewhere. It's not about getting rid of something talented just for the hell of it. And I'm so tired of conversations being based around that. We have to get rid of Nurk. I can't stand him. He needs to go. Screw him. And then Ant and Dame can't work. We got to get rid of Ant. And it's all about, we got to get rid of this guy. We got to get rid of this guy. We got to subtract. We got to subtract. We got to subtract. Guess what? That doesn't get you anywhere. I don't understand where people think that gets us. But that's the thing, is like, that's what's frustrating, Eric, with all the people saying, Tori, you're too negative. I never, ever view building a team from that perspective, because that is a negative perspective. Unproductive, pointless. If you're talking about going out and getting someone, obviously it's going to take something. If you're talking about getting Mikal Bridges, okay, you probably got to talk about giving up Ant in that trade. But the purpose is not to get rid of Ant. The purpose is to get Mikal. Hopefully people can see the difference.
You're probably giving up Ant number 3 and future picks to get Mikal at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Mikal's been phenomenal. Mikal might be completely off the table, right? It's just more of the discussion. And I'm setting y'all up for the off season, because that's how we're going to approach things. Yeah. And if you're if you're not with that, then we can't even have a conversation.
Yeah. Or like a forward that is realistic. I know at the deadline he wasn't, but he also hasn't played great since the deadline. And that's the same Nets team, Dorian Finney-Smith. Royce O'Neal also hasn't been great for them. He's a defensive forward. I don't know if we want those guys, but those are like realistic targets that we could get without giving up a bunch, and who would, even if they've struggled, this year, would be upgrades to what we had at those positions.
Yep. People want Tankathon, Eric. Let's let me read off a few things, then we can tank it up.
Okay.
Andy Marchant, member for 5 months, says, thoughts on Luka as a trade target if he asks out. Thanks, Andy, for the 5-month member dono. Eric, would you, the thing is so many teams in the league are going to want Luka, so it's going to be a team that just gives up an insane package. Might take us trading the number 1 pick if we get it, right? So, given what it would take to get him, what are your thoughts on him as a trade target?
I mean, he is one of the guys, normally I would say even the number 1 pick, you have to consider it. I don't know if I'm doing it, but I would definitely consider it. But then you also look at, Kyrie is a bad example, but him and Kyrie didn't exactly work after the trade deadline either. I don't know. I don't think there's any question. You're free to your own opinions out there if you think Kyrie's better than Dame, but I don't think it's close. And I think if Dame had the same type of caliber of teams that Kyrie had, he would look amazing too. But yeah, just I don't know. I'd be a little scared just with how him and Dame would work. But
it doesn't solve anything defensively. Given all the assets we'd give up, we'd be destined to having probably a bottom 5 defense.
If we could find a way to, obviously we'd re-sign Grant. So if you found a way to get that happen, and you had an MLE target, or let's say we had another trade somehow with Nas or whatever, for that Claxton trade or something. But I don't know how you get a player like that with all the assets you'd have to give up for Luka. So yeah, I don't know. It'd be fun to see, because Luka's an amazing player. Obviously he's probably a top 5 player at worst. So Yeah, he's pretty much unstoppable. And then Dame could get a ton of open shots off ball because we'd have like one of the most dominant on ball passers in the league. So yeah, it'd be fun to see, but I don't know. I mean, I definitely look into it if it's
absolutely
available.
But
the talk is he might not be available or he might ask out in a year from now. I don't think he's going to ask out this summer. He just got too many years left on his contract to have any leverage in that situation.
I don't think Luka makes enough sense for us to give up what it'd take to get him. Obviously, I'd be willing to give up a ton for him, given the talent that he is. But the thing is with Luka, I don't know how many people are going to completely disagree with this. We'll see. But he's obvious. Like, I know he went to the Western Conference Finals last year. I thought Phoenix absolutely botched that series. I thought they were terrible in that series. I thought Monty coached terribly in that series. Their game plan on Luka was terrible. When they went up against a true contending team like the Warriors, they weren't really much of a match. And that was probably as good of a team you could build around Luka without him having other stars. But I think the problem is a lot of other stars aren't great defensively. They're stars because of their offensive game. I mean, just look at Kyrie, right? Luka can obviously play with the ball in his hands. He is not a good off-ball player. He does not play good off the ball. Someone like Dame...
That's why the Kyrie trade was weird.
Yeah, that's the problem with Luka. So it's like, okay, you have to get him more talent, but then it's like, you're just going to use that talent off the ball and put the ball in Luka's hands? Are they, is like Kyrie as an off-ball player that much better than even an Anthony Simons? Like, they're similar caliber shooters. Like, if Kyrie doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's not a star. You know what I mean? He's a role guy in specific situations where he doesn't have the ball in his hands. The reason Kyrie's a star is because of what he can do with the ball. But when Kyrie has the ball, Luka's not good off of him. So how does that work on a team that contends? Like, how do you build a contending team around him?
I will say that Luka takes a majority of his threes are really tough, contested, step backs, all those kind of things. I think maybe if he had easier shots, he could maybe play off ball a little bit. But
yeah, but he's not going to be great at it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you can't build a contending team around him. I'm saying it's harder to than other top 5 players, okay?
I mean,
like, it's easier to build a contending team around Joel Embiid, in my opinion. It's easier to build a contending team around Giannis. It's easier to build a contending team around Jokic.
Mm-hmm.
Because those guys can play off of other good players. That's the thing with Dame, is Dame can play with the ball in his hands, and I feel like if you had another true star, he would be great playing off of him. Whereas Luka, it's questionable. Like, you kind of need to constantly put the ball in his hands. But they went away from that with Kyrie and got worse. And that's exactly my point. And I even said that at the deadline. Like, I think the Mavericks got worse. Because you need the ball in Luka's hands too much. So Kyrie, if he has the ball in his hands, is that better than just constantly having the ball in Luka's hands? I mean, it helps take the pressure off, but Kyrie's not better than Luka. Luka is not great off the ball. Defensively, they got worse. So in the end, it's actually, sure, they got more talented, and people look at that trade like, oh, they got a talent like Kyrie, top 20 player, and they only gave up, a couple of role guys. But without Finney Smith's defense, he kind of held things together defensively for them. Like, they're not good enough defensively. So that's the thing in regards to team building is...
Well, Brunson was huge, too.
Yeah, Brunson was huge. But it's just how all the pieces mesh together, and sometimes more talent isn't necessarily a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Well, one thing, though, I mean, like a Nurk-Luka pick and roll, then if defenses have to help off of that and you have Dame spotting up, though, that Luka's big enough to make those passes over the top to the opposite side three. So I do think they could maybe make it work, but yeah, it's not ideal, though.
And I don't want people to get confused. I'm not approaching this from like I wouldn't want Luka at all. Like, I'd be willing to trade Ant, the 3rd overall pick, and like 3-4 future firsts for him and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be willing to do that, but it's gonna cost even more than that for Luka at that point. I don't know. I don't know. Like, can Luka and Dame together just outscore teams enough where the defense doesn't matter, because that's the way they'd have to contend. And that didn't work. Kyrie is worse than Dame, obviously, but that didn't come close to working in Dallas.
Yeah. The only way, like, if Dame asked out or something, that is well, someone that, like, if you're, I mean, I don't see why Dallas would trade for Dame in that situation, because they'd be full rebuild most likely. But adding like Luka and Anthony as a backcourt, that's probably a little.
I'm gonna ban you for suggesting if Dame wants out.
I'm just saying, like, that'd be the only reason why I would, like, consider it. And then and Dame also maybe gets you to where you don't have to give up, and then Lucas obviously fits in with the young core. So yeah.
See, I hate answering a question like that, because like the casual fan will just say, obviously you gotta do whatever for a player that great, and it's like, that's not even necessarily completely wrong or anything, but there's so much context that needs to go into that conversation that matters, that a lot of people just won't ever take into account. And like, when we start talking about that context, it's like they think we're dumb. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like the same people that think the Kyrie trade would be great for Dallas, and then it doesn't work out. So questions like that are always tough to answer, because it deserves a lot of context, where a lot of people just think context doesn't even matter because it's freaking Luka. Shout out to Dro with the Drono. Eric, $2 Drono says Dame Ant Sharp is a solid 3. I mean, I think that's a 3-guard rotation next year.
Yep. And like I said, Sharp can play a little bit of 3, and can play a little bit of backup point guard. And yeah,
you figure things out. You just try and surround him with as many good defenders as possible.
Yep.
And see what that looks like. And if Sharp is so phenomenal off the bench, playing like 31 minutes a game and averaging 21 points per game or something, then okay, like, that's the thing is you don't give up Simons just to get rid of him this offseason for a trade that isn't that good, because it's like, what if a really good trade becomes available that Ant would be perfect for at next year's trade deadline? You know what I mean? Like, that the Blazers don't have enough assets to trade Ant for 50 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
They have to maximize his trade value. So that's the thing, and that's part of the whole conversation we had earlier about just trading Ant to trade him. They have to maximize his value if they trade him, because they don't have enough assets otherwise. So if that's not this offseason, that's not this offseason. You don't just trade him for anything, because then you're stuck in a position where you're not good enough and don't have enough assets to get good enough. Dro says, cough, cough, Siakam. Like, yeah, I mean, Siakam and Grant fit a little weird at the forward positions, but yeah, that could be a hypothetical guy. Maybe he becomes available in next year's trade deadline and isn't this offseason, and, you know, that could be a guy you really want. So it has to be the right trade, and that's why the conversation should all be about what we're getting back, not what we're, you know, just getting rid of a guy to get rid of him.
Murray, go listen to the beginning of the show where Tori announced his love for Kevin Knox. Yeah. I'm not. That's not a joke either.
It's kind of a joke.
No, it's no.
I did not serious. Say I love Kevin Knox.
I know, but like, you were giving him props, man.
I said he's looking good.
That was the nicest I've seen you towards a rotational player, like a bench player, all season.
And I still ended it with saying he can't be a part of the rotation next year. So, not to spoil it, Murray, but yeah, go have fun, I guess. I'll see you. Well, we have to wrap up the stream in 10 minutes, so let's get into this Tankathon, and then...
Was there any more donations? I thought there was one more.
Yeah, there is. There's 2 more. Hyper Prime with the $10 dono. What's up, Hyper? Good to see you, man. Says, y'all hear Dame's quote on his latest song remix of Heaven or Hell? He said, plotting on a ring, they say I should do the Lakers. F that loyal stuff. What if Reggie Miller left the Pacers? Yeah, I don't know what that quote means, but...
You didn't hear the rap song?
No.
Oh.
Not that one.
See, people... Yeah. Dame's saying he's not... that other people are telling him to do that, but he's saying it would have been weird if Reggie Miller left the Pacers.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, like, so...
Yeah,
that was just another way of him announcing that he's still loyal to Portland, so...
But... some former NBA coach guaranteed me, Eric, and said he'd email me his credentials. He never did, by the way. But he guaranteed me, and he said he knew what he was talking about, so we should just believe him. That Dame, everybody in the NBA knows that Dame's going to ask out, so we're the fools here.
Yeah. But yeah, he's just mad at everyone saying that he needs to go to LA and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And screw Matt Barnes, man. Screw Matt Barnes. Tyler Smith, we're not getting that started again. Shout out to Coleman Schleiss with the $10 dono. Says, hey, y'all, finally catching another stream live and just want to say I really appreciate your dedication. Never missing a game. Always enjoy the analysis from my dogs. Thank you, Coleman. Appreciate you, man. Glad to see you. Glad you appreciate our day in, day out, game in, game out dedication. Every game. When was the last... What? Have we not missed a game the last 3 years?
I don't think we missed a game, no.
Yeah. The first year we missed a couple. That was the first year we ever did it, so the setup wasn't good, and I was streaming on a laptop that could barely work when I was streaming. So
we definitely didn't miss one this year. I don't know if we missed one last year or not. But...
No. And then this off season, I am going to be upset with myself if I miss a day in terms of daily uploads between first day of the off season and August 1st. So we'll see. We'll see if I can keep that up. Thank you, Coleman, for the dono. Anyway, you know what it's time for. We need Tankathon theme music. Well, I guess hopefully we're not here again next year. So
today and tomorrow. Well, through May 16th. If you're not subscribed, we have a second channel, Blazers Uprise Live, starting Monday. Every Monday and Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. we'll have a twice weekly show throughout the summer too, live, so you can come get your questions answered and chat with us on those shows throughout the off season.
Yep. Picks against the spread obviously will be done with the regular season being done. So if you are just into us talking and answering your questions, that sort of thing, that will be perfect for you in the off season. Definitely go subscribe. And, if you've been holding out, now's time to give up on that holdout. Okay? Anyway, let's tank this thing, Eric. Tankathon. Wait, nope, that's not the right one. Yeah, it is the right one. Where's it at? There we go. Tankathon, sponsored by H&R Block. No, I'm just kidding. They're not actually a sponsor. That's just the ads on the side.
Bet online.
Bet online, not H&R Block. Indiana plays New York at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
I'm pretty sure on Bet Online you can vote on or bet on lottery and stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be funny.
Can I bet on the Blazers not moving up to take the sting off?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if that's an option, but it might be. Miami against Orlando tomorrow at 10 a.m. and it's New York against Indiana at 10 a.m. So by 12:30 p.m. we should know if we're locked into fifth best odds. If both Indiana and Orlando win, then this game tomorrow doesn't matter.
Thank you, Washington, last night.
Yep. So if they lose, one of those two teams loses, then we need to lose tomorrow. It would be dope to be able to root for a win tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think that Golden State's going to be playing for something, right?
It depends on if they want to position themselves to play the Kings or not. That might be interesting. But they are only a game ahead of the Lakers and the Pelicans, so they could easily fall in the play-in or a three-way tie. I'm not sure how the two-way, three-way tie scenarios work out, but they could indeed fall into a tie for 6, 7, 8, as could the Clippers. So there's a four-way tie scenario as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out.
The Warriors can still fall to 7 or 8.
Yeah.
So that means that they would
lose
a three-way tiebreaker.
There's no way they don't play tomorrow then, right? To win.
I would think so, yeah.
And they didn't play today, so they're not on a back-to-back, so that's also nice.
Yeah.
Because they win that game, and that gives them the playoffs at the earliest start next Saturday, so they would have at least 6 days off if they win. Yeah. So I don't see any way that they don't go all out for a win tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, you guys couldn't see the teams on the left. Playoffstatus.com is where I was looking at odds for certain seeds. So Warriors, it looks like, lose the tiebreaker because they still have a 13% chance at 8, a 21% chance at 7. My question is Gary Payton II playing tomorrow?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Do we have that injury report yet? If he's playing tomorrow and you're at the game, you better boo that man.
Relentlessly.
Yep. Boo
All
that
right.
man.
Let's get it.
All right. Tankathon, and then we got to run. So here we go. Let's simulate this thing. Fingers crossed for our hopes and dreams at 14. Utah via Minnesota at 13. Toronto at 12. OKC falls a spot, meaning that somebody moved up. Who's at 12, Eric? I just need you to have the normal Tankathon up so that you could tell me, because I don't remember. I think it might be Utah.
Was it Bulls?
It could be the Bulls.
No, Utah's out of the playoffs, so OKC wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I think it's the Bulls.
And
the
then
Bulls keep their pick.
Dallas is being investigated for their actions last night. Falls to 11 and loses their pick anyway. That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, that is hilarious. And Orlando doesn't get the Bulls pick. God, the Bulls moving up like that would create such chaos in terms of who even gets picks. So that would suck for Orlando. That would suck for Dallas. At 9, Washington. At 8, Indiana falls 2 spots, which means that the Orlando Magic, with their own pick, moved up into the top 4 to take the sting off losing the Bulls pick.
So we're going to be at 7 then.
So we're supposed to be at 7, and at 7 is your Portland freaking Trailblazers. At 6, Charlotte. At 5, Detroit. At 4, it's Houston. At 3, it's Orlando. At 2, Chicago. And at 1, the San Antonio Spurs.
Wemby is starting at power forward next to Zach Collins.
Oh my goodness, that's my dream front court.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, he's their starting center next year.
Popovich announced, and certain Blazers media thought that meant that they didn't want Wembanyama because Wemby can't play anything but center, I guess.
Who thought that?
I'm not saying.
I mean,
you can take a guess.
Chat, do you know? Because I need to... Who said that? What? Bro, if... what is wrong with our media? Raiden, is that true? Oh. Anybody who thinks that the Spurs don't want a generational prospect that can play the 4 or the 5 because they're going to start Zach Collins, who can play the 4 or the 5, is absolutely out of their freaking mind. This is why you guys come here, okay? So that you don't have... That is one of the worst things I've ever heard.
I'm sure he'll either delete the tweet or say it was a joke, but... Anyways, yeah. They're just setting it up for... If we get Wemby, that means we can get rid of Nurk.
They've literally been tanking. Like, what? All right, well... Anyway... Eric, you gotta run, so that's a wrap for the stream. That's the note we're gonna end on. Yeah, guys, the Spurs would still take Wemby number 1. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking otherwise. And anything else for this second to last stream of the year, Eric?
Thank you, everyone, for watching. The plan tonight, we're still gonna kind of wing it, but hopefully most of the spreads will be up tonight for tomorrow, so we may have a late 11:30 midnight edition of Blazers Uprise Live. So if you want to vote for chat's final day's picks, I was 1 game better than you guys yesterday, so you're 4 games behind with 15 games tomorrow, so still a chance to win it all. So we might see you guys late tonight. If not, we'll just have to make something work via Twitter and voting somehow with just everyone's picks. So just be a part of the Discord or keep an eye on our Blazers Uprise YT Twitter page, and we'll get you the details on when it won't be anything but just doing picks, so it won't be like a serious stream or anything. Just the final day of picks. Like to do it because there's 15 games, all teams playing, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. So we'll keep you posted. Post-game show tomorrow is going to be at right after the game. I know I said that we were going to have to figure something out with that. It will be right after the game. So right after the game's final, we'll have our final post-game show of the year. Hopefully you can catch us. And with that being said, that's a wrap for this edition of the Blazers Uprise post-game show presented by BetOnline. The Blazers lose again, 136-125 against the Clippers, and are one loss away from having 10.5% odds at Victor Wembanyama and a 42% chance of the top four, which is pretty nice. So we'll have you covered going into the offseason. Stay tuned for videos and such. And with that being said, we are out of here. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.